Well, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Chris McKenna. I'm the founder of an organization over in the United States called Protect Young Eyes. We're boots on the ground. In fact, my team right now is struggling with travel delays because of the storm that is rolling through the United States at the moment to visit schools and churches. We're going to have a conversation today with just an amazing group of friends here. I feel like we're going to have a good just morning conversation together. Connection versus connectivity, tackling the epidemic of loneliness. And I'm joined here by four friends. First, I want to introduce Dr. Gaia Bernstein. She works in tech, privacy, and policy. She's a professor of law at Seton University and also an author. I would recommend that you watch her TED Talk that she did this past year. Just fascinating insights for us. Next, I want to introduce Michele Uva, the UEFA Director of Social and Environmental Sustainability. I'm really excited to have you here today, Michele. Third, Dr. Mitch Prinstein, who's been very active on the panels here so far this week. He's the Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association, also co-director with Dr. Ava Tesler of the Winston National Center of Tech Use, the Brain, and Psychological Development at Chapel Hall, North Carolina University, Chapel Hill. And then finally, Dr. Phil McRae, here, educator and scholar, but also the executive staff officer of the Alberta Teachers Association. Phil is a leading educational policy formation gentleman who works for over 50,000 Canadian teachers, facilitating conversations and really loves having discussions about the intersection between students, AI, and teaching. So friends, as we talk about loneliness here, we're looking at all different elements, different layers of society where our children are and where we're failing them in their ability to connect with each other. And even though we're more connected, why is it that we feel less connected? I want to start with some numbers. I think sometimes when you talk about a big issue like loneliness, it's hard just to really grasp what does that mean, right? Just yesterday, there was a post by Dr. Jean Twenge. She's been at the forefront of this conversation with teens and loneliness. And she reported that the percentage of 13 to 18-year-olds who mostly agree with the statement that my life isn't useful has risen from 12.5% in 2007 up to over 20% in 2023, right? Over a 60% increase. One of the statistics that maybe you noticed out there in the hallway in the UK, that 30% of teens don't know how to make new friends. They simply don't have those skills. And then finally, one thing that was worth noting, our outgoing US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, he equated loneliness, today's loneliness, to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, right? The same impact on the human condition. And yet, we're fully connected, so why? So I want to start there, right? What is this difference? We talk about connection versus being connected. Mitch, I think I want to start with you. Like, why are those words sound so similar? Why is it that we find ourselves then in the position that we're in today?
Well, the human brain is really able to trick us into feeling like the attention that we get from others gives us a signal that we might be satisfying our psychological needs for connection. We have the same dopamine response in the brain when we see someone liking our post or following us. But what's important is that it's missing the most important ingredient, which is really that sense of emotional intimacy that we need to have with others to not feel lonely. And that's what it is that we're missing. According to research that's being done, it shows us that actually the more we did a research study where we were able to look at kids' devices and look at how much the device recorded the number of times they picked up their phone, what they did when they picked up their phone. Well, we had kids picking up their phones on average 100 times a day, but the range was from 0 times a day up to 400 times a day. There were quite a few up there. The more they picked up their phone to use social media, actually, at the end of the day, they felt more lonely. Although arguably they were having more social connections, they were not feeling connected because kids recognize that what they're seeing online is not a real, genuine relationship that they're having with others. It's more information that others want them to see to make them feel like they are popular, or that they have high status, or that they'll get many followers and likes. And missing that emotional intimacy, kids are feeling incredibly alone.
So in other words, we've labeled it something that sounds like the thing, but it really isn't the thing. Almost in the same
Friends,
way that
yeah,
you have Facebook
right.
friends, right? I think you were just about to go there, so I won't stop you, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's right. I mean, when we have a connection with others that's meaningful, which you can have on texts, you can have on direct messages. But think about the behavior of most kids. When we
Yes.
ask them what they do when they're online, they often say that they feel such a pressure to like their friends' posts that they simply go through and like everything on their phone without even reading it.
Right.
And when they're called to Instagram or another platform, it's not because they are looking for ways to find a connection or a meaningful way of feeling psychologically close to somebody.
Right.
It's because they're pressured that if they don't go online and like their friend's selfie, that person might get mad at them for
That's right.
leaving them without many
There's
comments.
almost this social hierarchy or compulsion to have to. I've observed this in teenagers, Snapchat in particular, Mitch, where it's not about who I'm connected with. If I have an unread snap, I simply will take a picture of the ceiling, and I've observed this just to be able to take the picture to send it back, because if I don't respond immediately, I'm a bad friend. Right? So I'm connected to them through this app, but do I really know anything about them? Big difference, right?
Exactly.
So Phil, you oversee, thousands of teachers who are interacting with tens of thousands of students. What are some of the things that you're hearing in education related to this issue of loneliness?
Well, thank you, and good morning.
Yeah.
In Canada, schools are a place that should be safe and caring, but they should also be a place where you belong. One of the things that we try and do every day is that for every student, there'll be an adult who knows that student and checks in with them and makes sure that they have a really good sense of what's happening. But what we see across North America is neglect is now becoming a bigger issue than abuse. And when we talk about neglect, when we talk about loneliness, um, what we're seeing increasingly is the actual implications of what that means to a child's sense of well-being. So, when the brain um, registers loneliness, the body feels pain. So now we're seeing increasingly where children are feeling alone together, as Dr. Sherry Turkle in her famous book, wrote, where they're with the technology, they have 1,000 friends, but they don't really have any friends. That for us is a deep, deep concern. We don't want to have young people coming to a school that should be a place of belonging, and they feel intensely isolated. And that technology, that amplifying that sense of loneliness, as Mitch was just saying, is something that we're really trying to find ways to push back on. So how do you get young people to have conversations, look each other in the eye, build friendships that are deep and meaningful, because they crave that connection? And what we're seeing, and we saw in the video, is an artificial intimacy. It's not a sense of intimacy. And that, for us, is heartbreaking as teachers.
Sure.
To see that, to see children that should be in playgrounds playing, and instead they're literally circling the school looking at a device, right? There are patterns of behavior that we see that are really shocking. So we're trying to take this epidemic of loneliness coming out of a pandemic, right? We have to recognize the historical moment. We had a pandemic where we all felt isolated. And we see developmental delays of 2 years in our students. And now with loneliness, working with our physicians and healthcare practitioners and others, our schools in Canada are trying to really understand what's happening, understand the science, but also try and find pragmatic ways to disconnect them from that technology in ways that can give them that human connection.
So we have AI as artificial intelligence in every other house here in Davos, and yet you just heard a different definition for AI here, right? This artificial intimacy. I think that's really key. And that must be, I can only imagine, as a teacher whose deepest desire as a teacher is to see children thrive. what sort of just tension and distress that creates in them. Especially, I remember speaking to you before, teachers in Canada, when a student is at school, there's a real loving ownership of that student in the classroom that I think is even different than what I've seen in the States. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, part of the I think anybody in a caring profession, any parent, you want the best for your children, for your students, for your patients, whatever it is, right? In any form of care. What um, we call it moral distress. So what's happening is you know what the right thing to do is to help your children, right? You know that this relationship they have with technology is not benefiting them in many ways, the amount of time they're spending, and yet they don't know how to change it. So it creates this, I know the right thing to do, but I don't have the resources or the approach to do it. So we're really working on an education structure right now where we help give people through human change, through different organizations and groups, teachers tools to help break down some of that loneliness. Sure. And I think fundamentally, we have to think about this not just about being alone. That's life. Being alone is also life. We have to teach young people, as again, we were talking earlier this morning, Dr. Sherry Turkle in her book, she said, if you don't teach children how to be alone and comfortable with themselves, not just have the technology all the time, they will grow up to be lonely. If that makes sense. If you don't teach them how to be alone and comfortable at some places, they will grow up to be lonely. So yes, this is about interactions with others,
That's right.
But it's also being able to sit with yourself in a place that you can, I grew up on a ranch in the Rocky Mountains in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And I would go out and nature was my playground. And my friends that were 5 miles away that I would walk to and visit or whatever. You have to learn how to thrive in a world as opposed to being connected 24/7 with your device, whatever that device is, feeding you this artificial intimacy.
Right. That ability to self-reflect and to process on your day. Yeah. Michele, UEFA has connections with millions of children, not only here in Europe, but I mean, football is the superpower of athletics, as I call it, this great unifier globally. Are you noticing, even among the coaches, are you reading information from them that they're reflecting back to you, even all the way up in headquarters? Is this playing out also in sport?
Yeah. Thanks for, first of all, thanks for invitation. I'm very happy to be in a scientific panel. It's more for me to learn something than don't again. But in any case, it's better to explain what football is doing, or soccer, if you prefer. There is a lot of American in the room. I don't want to mislead. It's 1 year ago, we was in the same place in Davos. We was starting our journey on this topic. We set a strategy 2030 in December 2025. One topic was health and well-being, and one is child protection. I think they are combined. We are combining them. We have 7 policies on human rights, 4 policies on environment. Ideally, all the policies are interconnected, and this is the best way. And what football can do, we discussed that the football could be an antidote to the loneliness, antidote of digital addiction. And we are working on it. During the last year, thanks also to human change that approach us, and we are working very closely together to build something concrete to go in deep. But let me, from my side, say that we are part of the solution. We are not the solution. We could be part of the solution. I think I mentioned before. I think that we create I think that there is the social pyramid. The base of the social pyramid for us in Europe is family. And in Europe, we have more than 100 million under children and young adults, under 18, 100 million.
Yes.
The second step in the pyramid is schools, where 92 millions under 18 attended. Football is 25 millions. We have 25 million registered players in our 55 national associations. But of course, I think this is not process top down, is a process also bottom up. We cannot do anything if the schools and the family have not the same approach how to deal with loneliness of the children. We need
This alignment.
Bottom up, but of course we want to do our part.
Sure.
This is why we set the strategy, why we are working closely with Human Change to create toolkit to support all our 55 national associations, because then there is also the football pyramid that is UEFA, 55 national association, 750 top clubs, but 250,000 grassroots amateur clubs. In this case, it's a top-down.
That's right.
We are creating to inspire our clubs, inspire our national association, giving them toolkit how to deal with, and of course, coaches,
That's right.
parents, referees. Everyone is involved in this process. And we are trying to create a common path to be the solution of the loneliness, because it's football is a solution. Because when there is in the team, in the dressing room, you have 24 kids, children, you have a teammate,
Right.
you can talk together, you can discuss the match together, and then I will explain what we did with Human Change, because we did a survey with us in six nations.
Yes.
South, East, West, and South. We created different nations with 1,000 children to understand how they feel the digital opportunity or the digital risk. And we have some very interesting topics to explain.
Yeah, we'll come back to that, because I think some of that
Yes.
data here is very, very interesting.
But
yes,
we feel our responsibility.
that's right.
Power and responsibility is our main driver.
That's just so fabulous to see that partnership grow over this past year.
Yes.
And the power into the future that we'll see from this partnership.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And hope to be in the next year to make it the next.
That's right.
The future step.
Yeah. Gaia, you see a number of different angles to this, right? At the micro, all the way down to the students that maybe you have in the classroom, but then also at the macro, there are entire business models that have been built to keep us connected in a way that really is this false connection. You could speak in a number of different areas, but if you don't mind starting there, just kind of at that company level, what is happening there to facilitate this loneliness at scale, really?
Sure. So we know that kids spend, about 8 hours a day on screens. We spend many hours a day on screens, and it's not a coincidence. There's a business model that's been dominant practically since the beginning of the internet, in which we get our products for free. So we get Gmail for free, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, but we pay. We pay with our data and with our time. So basically, tech companies need us to stay online for as long as possible so they can collect data on us, because they make money from targeted advertising. The advertising is effective if they know what stuff we're looking at. Then they want us to stay online for as long as possible, so we'll see the advertising and buy the products. That's how they make money. So they use very sophisticated algorithms to make sure that we stay online for as long as possible.
That's right. And it just keeps feeding itself over and over and over again. Yeah.
Right, and I think part of what happens here is that the more time we spend on screen, and especially our kids spend on screen, the less we have the social skills or the desire to go and interact with people. It becomes a bit like going to the gym, going to meet someone if you can text them. And it's a bit of a vicious cycle. I see myself, I'm sitting at home and a friend tells me she's buying an apartment. In New York City, it's a big deal to buy an apartment. So she's texting me, and instead of meeting with her or talking even, we're texting. And this texting goes on for an hour because we text back and forth, and my kids are around me. So every time I get another text, I stop talking to them and I'm back texting. So what's happening here that I'm not in communication with the people around me, and I'm not really in communication with her because it's very going back to what Mitch was talking about. It's more about connectivity than real communication. I don't see her face. I don't see how I feel. She's just sending me statistics about the apartment she's buying.
And so I guess, but what makes us different, right? In terms of species, what is it about human beings? And Mitch, I'll probably start with you on this. What is it that makes us unique? And watching Dr. Jim talk to us yesterday via Zoom, he made I think, a really strong statement. He said that attachment is one of the most critical components of overall human development, right? What goes on in those first years, right? So, but what is it about human beings that demands that we connect? And when we don't do that, that there's such drastic impacts on us as a species?
Well, we were not the only human beings on the planet 60,000 years ago. There were 4 or 5 different species that were very similar to us, but they all went extinct, and here we all sit. And what was so surprising about this is that we should not have been the ones to survive. We were actually much smaller and weaker and more fragile than the other species that could withstand severe temperatures or attacks from predators. The only reason why we're here is because of a small genetic mutation that changed the shape of our voice box and our brain, and that gave us the ability to start language. Language made us a herding species, and we survived because of our connections, because of our community, because we became a herd. We protected one another, we warned one another, we raised children together, we worked as a group. And as a group, we could survive better than all of those other species. In fact, today, 60,000 years later, if you are rejected or if you have a bad experience, we see remarkably powerful signals in the brain and in every cell of your body responding to that social rejection, because we are so sensitized to having to be connected and have a connection, I should say, right. Feeling that sense of community. Well, now flash forward almost all those 60,000 years, and we have been a society that has relied on each other, depended on each other. We couldn't get much done if we didn't do it as part of a community. Until about 20 years ago. Now you can work from home alone. You can order food to be delivered to your house without ever having to leave your apartment. And you can form all of your social relationships sitting at home on your device. And what we're noticing in just 20 years is that it doesn't fit with 60,000 years of evolution that has gotten us to this point. Our brains crave what we were built for, what we survived for. And this is too quick a change for us to adapt so quickly. So yes, kids are experiencing loneliness, and so are adults.
Absolutely.
Adults are spending more time on the phone than they would like. Adults are feeling disconnected. And this is something that's affecting all of us as a species.
That's right. Yeah, if I were to ask the audience here about your most significant, meaningful interaction that you've had with another human being, I'm going to guess it wasn't yesterday's Instagram post, right? You would point to some thing that you did, maybe out on the ranch with a friend, right? Whatever it was, that connection. In fact, I think Phil, you and I experienced that last night. Just the beauty of connection, guys that were getting together just to talk about life. Nobody recording anything, posting anything, just a space to experience a physical thing together, and just how meaningful that really is.
And I think, to take on what Gaia had said about being present but absent, when the texts were coming in and you had others around you, I think there are generational differences where, we want to be present. You want to try and be there. But if you're not, one of the things that we know from research around having a phone out is that if you have your phone out and it is up in front on a table or in your hand, people are less likely to trust you because they don't think you're paying attention to them.
That's right. Have you felt this? Yeah.
Right?
Sure,
so if
yeah.
you take and you turn your phone down, that increases the trust, but there's still a sense that you're not present. You're still absent. But if you have your phone away and you're having a conversation and you're looking somebody in the eye and you're feeling and reading the responses and you're actually being a wise listener, that changes that relationship building. And so, it's important. I mean, the conversations, five people talking about children and life, and that is bonding. And to Mitch's point about the human need to bond, to have connection, that evolutionary drive that's there, it isn't just children, it's adults, it's all of us. And in an attention economy, which is the background to the digitalization and datafication of everything in our world, we have to be mindful of what it's doing in the long term, because it will have long-term consequence.
Yeah. Phil, can
Go
I
ahead.
just add on to that and say that in the psychological research, there's a new topic that's being studied, and it's called technoference. And it's the idea that young children, toddlers, 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, are saying that their parents spend more time looking at their phones than looking at them. And they're reporting that whatever this is, it's more important than me. It's more important than watching my football game or my soccer game, because if you look at the sidelines, you often will see all the parents not looking up and watching their child, but looking down at the phone while their children are playing. Yeah. And even if you're having a conversation with another adult, how many times do they say, "Oh, wait, stop, I got a text, and it might be more important than the interaction I'm having with you right now"? This is new. This is something we didn't do 20 years ago, but it's something that sends kids a message. This is more important than this.
It's fascinating, Mitch, to hear you say that. I was speaking to a group of parents, and they had decided that they were not going to be on their phones as much as they normally had. And one thing that you often see when parents say go to a park, they think they're doing the right thing by letting their children play in the park, and then what do the parents do? They sit on the bench and they're on their phone. And this particular couple of moms reflected to me that they had decided that when going to the park with their children, they were not going to be on their phones. And what they noticed in watching their children play for the very first time, because they never did before with their phones out, is how often their children actually looked back to them while playing, looking for that affirmation. Did you notice me? I'm playing, right? It was almost this sort of, and they didn't even realize that they were missing that this whole time. But the joy in seeing their children play and the joy that they were reciprocating to their children just by looking at them back when they wanted to see mom's eyes was so impactful to them. It really left an impact. So
this is our responsibility as parents. Huh?
That's right.
Everything starts from us, not from our children.
That's right. They see what
us.
They become. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't, for example, coming back to the football, you don't use football when you play. You don't use football. You don't use a device when you are in the dressing room. You don't use the device when you are traveling from one side to another side. This is the only 2 hours free from devices and with human connection. This is what we need to emphasize, and we need to stress to the coaches.
Yes.
And
definitely.
also we push to coaches, also with an educational toolkit, don't use device in front of your team. Put away your device and talk with them, because you are an example. I have a child of 13 years old. Sometimes he told me, "Oh, Nello, my coach, told me that I don't need to do this." Say, I did it. I told you the same. But Nello is his coach. And Nello is more important sometimes than parents. It's more powerful in terms of human relations. This means friendship in a dressing room is perfect.
That's
during the trip to go to play in the match is connection. In that moment, it's useful, but the coach must teach to all the team, please don't use the device, but first of all, he must store the device
Right.
away. Yeah.
Model that first.
Yes,
right?
first.
Yeah.
Exactly. Lead by example.
That's right. Guy, you're starting to spend a little more time looking at it. It's not just the device. There are entire systems, other devices in the periphery, other interactions that we have as human beings that seem to be pointing toward isolation just in the macro sense. What are some of the things that you're starting to spend more time on just as you look at this issue?
Right. So my work started with looking at screens, but I'm working on a new project called Technologies of Loneliness. And I believe that loneliness is coming at us not just from tech companies, but from the way many businesses are operating these days. And I'm going to give some examples. So one thing is self-service. You probably notice that often now when you go to stores, you can check out by yourself. When you go to the airport, you can check in on your app. You don't have to do it in the airport. You go to restaurants. Some restaurants, you can actually order food on the screen. The way this is described, this is a great solution. Convenience, efficiency, you're saving a lot of time. But what is really, really happening here is that corporations are shifting the labor to us. It takes me much more time to order food from a menu by myself than to take the waiter to input it into their iPad if they took the order. But that's not the only thing that's going on. The big thing that's going on here is that we see fewer and fewer people through our day. We don't have to see waiters. We don't have to see people at the checkout. We don't have to, even if we go to a hotel, they offer us, you can check it in advance. You don't have to go through a concierge. So your days are becoming lonelier and lonelier. And I'll give you an example from my own life. I teach in a law school, and we have a cafeteria. So and there's always this rush hour when everybody gets out of class and everybody wants to buy food. So there would be a wait time, 10 minutes. You would be waiting in line. And so I would wait there and I would talk to my students. Well, guess what? We have these machines now that it's not just self-service, but we can actually order in advance. So now I'm saving time. I don't have to spend 10 minutes in the cafeteria, but I don't chat with my students anymore. So this is one example. There's so many. I'll just give another one. As we know, kids are much more lonely because they spend so much time on screens and social media. So now there's a solution for loneliness. We have these AI friends. So more and more boys and young men have AI girlfriends. This is much more convenient because it's not messy. The girlfriends do exactly as they want.
That's right.
At the same time, it's not just girlfriend. We have lots of AI companion websites. The most famous now is, maybe I should say infamous, is Character AI. But basically, you can find any kind of friend you want, and they talk with human voice. And they act like humans. They have to stop because they have to go to have dinner, and they will cater to your desires. So why deal with the complexity of real relationship when you can have these relationships online? But at the end, because you have this option to have a relationship online, you're lonelier than ever. You have fewer and fewer real life relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when children are seeing this, whether it's observing their parents ordering food from that non-human contact, whatever it is, I think that starts to bear out certain behaviors in them. What is some of the research starting to show us? I mean, you're talking about things today that we don't even know the impacts fully, right? We'll see it, but we already have some research pointing toward children being caught up in this, and what is it showing in some of the trend lines? Mitch, do you mind exploring some of that with us?
Sure. what we're seeing are a couple things. One is more social anxiety for kids because they're losing the practice of having that spontaneous speech with a waiter, with somebody that they're standing online next to. And as a result, I don't know if you've ever seen an adolescent craft a text to someone that they might have a crush on. It can take hours, and it involves many people to decide how many emojis and exactly how to say it. Well, that's all helpful for that interaction, but it takes away the experience of just responding to somebody spontaneously. So kids without that practice are now having more social anxiety where they don't want to be in situations where they will have to respond spontaneously. We're also seeing that, and this is very hard to think about for those of us that grew up without technology,
Right.
but kids are experiencing what's referred to as digital stress. It's the kind of stress of having to constantly deal with all of those notifications coming in and having to fear that they will miss out on something if they put their phone aside or away. In fact, if you're a teen and your best friend has posted a selfie, you must go online within just 5 minutes and tell them that they look great in their selfie,
Right.
or they will actually get mad at you. How dare you not support me when I posted my selfie? So to kids, this is incredibly stressful. We asked a number of undergraduate students around 18, 19 years old, when you post something, how long do you spend looking to see how that post is doing? And kids reported that they spend 30 minutes doing nothing in their lives, but refreshing to make sure that their post is getting a sufficient number of likes or comments. And if they get unfavorable comments, they have to take down the post.
That's right.
Immediately. Well, you put all this together, and 45% of kids, almost half, are reporting that digital stress is interfering with their daily roles and routines, their sleep, their homework, their exercise. The more digital stress they report today, the more depression they tell us they're experiencing a year later.
And it's not even always just interactions with their own devices. Phil, you referred to this earlier. I think we've seen this in PISA. The sheer presence of a device around me reminds me that I might be missing out.
That's right.
Reminds me that I might need to refresh because it's been longer than 5 minutes or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that's just a reminder that the human brain, especially at that vulnerable stage of really wanting to be connected to those around us, that adolescent phase, is reminding them exactly of what's causing them stress in the first place. It's a cycle. So, Phil, yeah.
One of the things that I'm watching in Davos that has been interesting is the normalization of this loneliness or an autonomous future. I actually walked by 2 or 3 advertisements about, the coming future of agentic AI and things that are going on, and it shows an individual on their phone with look forward to the autonomous future. Look forward to the ability to have the self-serve to do it. Years ago, there was a product called the iPotty for iPad, where you had put a child in front of an iPad on a potty as they were learning to go to the washroom. There were playground armor. So when the parent was on the sideline on their phone, if the child fell off the slide, they'd get a notification on their phone because there's sensors in the playground armor. Like, the commercialization of loneliness, the normalization, for me, is a really big problem. We live storied lives. The stories we tell each other, what we see around us, is starting to almost try and normalize this idea that this is the way that it is. It's actually not the way that it is. And we have to start having a dialogue about the kind of world that we want to shape moving forward. One of the famous quotes from The Color Purple is, the greatest barrier to power is the belief you don't have any. But once you believe you can affect the future and have change, you can. And I think these conversations, these panels, this idea of doing more research, more practical application to build a better future is what we have to do. And it's not from just experts or organizations. I mean, it's really important for the hundreds of thousands of students, millions of football players. It's more about every single one of us making a choice every single day to try and be present, not absent, not let the phone pull that away from us. And once we start changing the story, breaking that normalization of a wonderful, autonomous, isolating future, I think we will start to collectively see more action. And young people now, games. They love to play board games. There is this, in Alberta, we've removed schools or phones from the schools recently, 6 months ago. And we see lunch, the cafeteria, filled with conversation again. Right? We see hallways. Dr. Prinstein and I have a study which we're doing, the largest study right now around what's the impact of the cell phone ban. One of the questions that you had created is, do you see more conversation now after the cell phone prohibition is in place? And we see a vast majority saying yes. And I think that is something we all have at the individual and collective level to start working on for a much better future.
That's right.
Yeah, I think what Phil said about stories is really, really important.
Okay.
The idea that Mark Zuckerberg told us this biggest story. We're going to connect the world. We see how connected we are right now. You talked about autonomy. That we're told about autonomy, efficiency, convenience. These are stories that sell us loneliness at the end, and we should start paying attention and seeing beyond what we are being sold.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Michele, go ahead, and then Mitch.
It's not linked to football, but last week I was in dinner in embassy, Spanish embassy in Italy. For the first time after 25 years, more, probably 30 years, was a dinner with the 20 people, no one with mobile on the table, no one watching a mobile. At the end was, honestly, for my dinner, after 30 years, was super exciting. But at the end, all of us told, no one watch, no one make a picture, no one, we discuss. We was together. It was a fantastic atmosphere. I think the addiction is I don't want to be too strong. Like drink one bottle of wine. After 1 hour, if you drink a good wine, you are super happy. You are super excited. You are enjoyable. Then there is loneliness. Probably we need now, after 20 years, where we are super excited of the new technology, how to use them, we need to normalize the use. And once again, we need to teach our children what is the best. I know that is not easy, but of course we have to do it.
No, you're exactly
Sorry,
right.
it's something I jump from football to my personal life, but it's
the Italians know wine.
You brought in wine. I mean,
wine, but it's
that's right.
The right wine. First, we drink one bottle of wine, and now we drink 2 glasses. It's better good wine that one. Yes, okay,
That's
please.
very good. No, I think you're right. We can see through those messages. We've been told since the beginning that everything related to technology is an advance. And I think, Gaia, you're exactly right. We need to press into the truth of those messages. And I think one of the points of the human change movement is this look at children, right? It's one thing for us in order to make some of these changes, but our children are in such a unique developmental time. I heard a doctor say recently, Dr. Meg Meeker, she's from my home state of Michigan, and she works a lot with children and development. And she said that she would rather have her teenage children start to smoke than start social media. Neurologically, because her point was, and it's a bit of a hyperbole, but her point was, if you stop smoking, your lungs will recover. You can become an athlete, your lungs will recover. But this unique developmental time that children find themselves in, neurologically, and the wiring that's going on, some of that, she said, I'm not sure if there's full recovery without a lot of work. So what is it about this unique phase that we find our children in, right? It's one thing for us to realize, let's keep our phones away while we're enjoying that bottle of wine or whatever it is with our friends. But what is it that's so imperative about guarding this developmental phase that we find our children in right now?
Well, we're still learning about the effects on the brain, but what we know is that the social brain starts supercharging, really maturing very rapidly at the ages of 10 or 11. And the part of our brain that allows us to stop pursuing every possible impulse doesn't finish developing until the age of 25. So during this period from 10 until 25, you really have kids who are going to be biologically wanting, needing, wishing for lots of attention socially. Now, we used to have a cap on that. They went home from school and they could only interact with their neighbors or siblings. But now that we've made it possible for them to get that attention at all hours of the day, it shouldn't surprise any of us that they are trying to get that attention at all hours of the day. It is a perfect storm of their biological needs, and now a device that allows them to satisfy them to excessive levels.
That's right.
And I think that we have to remember that for kids, they can't help it to some extent.
Right.
And kids who tell you, I promise if you get me a phone, I won't use it too much.
That's right.
That's just not a promise that kids can keep. There are many brilliant people and billions of dollars that have been invested in keeping them on the device. And no matter how smart and great the willpower is of a 12-year-old, they're just no match for all of the energy that's put in. So it's really up to us to make a choice that sets up a policy, a structure, or an environment around them that helps them to make a safe choice for them.
Yeah, it's the quote I've heard is, we've put our children up against the world's most brilliant software engineers, and then we get upset when they fail. I think all of us would have too. Yeah. Another thing that I'm reminded of is I heard a doctor say this, that we have to be the prefrontal cortex for our children. Mm-hmm. Because if you've ever said to a teenager who did something you didn't understand, what were you thinking? Well, now you know they weren't, right? We have to do that for them to give them those stopping cues. So what do we say to parents at a real practical level? I think we've created the foundation of what the harms are, what some of the research is showing us, right? There are parents and professionals and other leaders here who are saying, okay, what do we do about this at a practical level? I can't change policy, I can't pass laws, but what are some of the things that I can do right now, maybe in the micro, to help turn some of this back? I'm sure all of you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm taking off what Mitch had said. I'm going to go right back to early childhood.
Okay.
One of the things we know about the core story of the brain development, is that you need a serve and return. So when you are nurturing and you're with children at the youngest of ages, and you're talking to them and they're reading your facial expressions, and there's that presence, that serve and return builds the brain. So we have to go back, if we talk about what we're going to do,
right,
and not let a device interrupt that serve and return in the brain development. What we know from the research is if it is interrupted, there's a toxic stress in the child, right? And that toxic stress undermines the core brain architecture and development. So I go back to early childhood, mm-hmm. and really thinking about that. And it's not just mothers and childs, it's fathers and children, it's everybody around that. So I would say one of the most practical things is that, we need to nurture that space, mm-hmm. and then nurture collaborative play. Let young, one of the things we didn't talk about here, but is really, we see it in schools, is it's okay to make mistakes and fail. It's okay to get the wrong text when you're asking somebody out. It's okay on the football pitch not to win or to fall down. We need to encourage a space where free play, mm-hmm. and play in itself is encouraged, and it's not parents over top, structuring it.
That's right.
Yeah, we need to get back. So those are two practical things. The serve and return shouldn't be interrupted, and encourage play, right? Play is creativity, free play at all ages.
So for all of us to be present. Yeah, go ahead, Gaia.
Yeah, so I think what I would say, parents feel very, very guilty because they try so hard and the kids are still on screens and somehow they think it's their fault. So what I would say is that parents should stop blaming themselves and start blaming those actually responsible. Because it's not only that the tech companies took our kids' childhood, they also in a way took our rights to be parents. And so becoming angry is the second thing, and turning this anger into action. And this technology affects all of us, not just our kids. We're all in the same boat. But change is going to start from kids, because we know from all the research that kids suffer the greatest harm. And also, as a law professor, I can say that we all always protected kids. Kids can't drive, they can't gamble, they can't buy cigarettes. So we know that any change will happen from kids. And parent asks, so what can I do? I've been doing this work since about 2016, and have seen so much change over the last year and a half. There's an incredible grassroots movements of parents, of organizations like Mama, organizations like Human Change, Project Liberty, together with a legal political movement. And parents can join the parents organizations. I think the strongest move right now is what's happening in schools, and schools are affected by parents in different communities. Banning cell phones in schools and doing something about it will make a big difference, because it, first of all, sends a message to all parents that this is not okay.
Right.
That they should think twice before giving kids cell phones at a younger age. And also, it sort of counteracts the message that schools have always been sending out, that technology is good. So, to summarize this, I think parents should stop feeling guilty and become angry, and turn this anger into action by joining this movement.
Yeah, thank you very much. Round of applause for that. Thank you. Michele, at a very practical level, UEFA has jumped into this, and you have some very exciting tools that are on the horizon here, just weeks away. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about that?
Yes. The toolkit, we identify 6 topics on health, well-being, and child protection. One is physical activity. How is important to practice any sports or any physical activity. Right. Second is nutrition. The third is digital addiction. The fourth is substance abuse, substance awareness, alcohol, but of course in sports there is also. Right. The fifth is road safety. Why road safety? Because every day parents drive millions of kilometers to bring their children to the training center and back. And the sixth one I don't remember, but I will give it. All of them are interconnected, because nutrition is linked to physical activity. Physical activity is linked to mental health. Mental health is the sixth one. With mental health is linked to the digital addiction. We identify that all the 6 policies are what we did. Practical toolkit. We are providing the toolkit that is one documentary with the support of famous football players, coaches, but also grassroots initiative.
Right.
The podcast. The third is a scientific paper, a white paper, where we explain why we are taking care of this. Everything is linked to football, of course, not to the big problem. Mm-hmm. And then we have practical tips.
That's right.
For parents, for coaches, and for young children and young adults. Practical tips.
That's excellent.
And at the end, we have an educational paper for each coach, how to deal with this topic in the dressing room, and how the federation must deal with all the coaches.
Right.
We think that the chain, and with parents, we need that the chain is what I mentioned before in the pyramid. Families means parents. What is the role of the parents to interconnect these 6 topics? What is the role of teachers? Teachers not only in the school, but coaches for us. Our teachers are the coaches that every day meet the children for 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. And then what is the role of the institutions? Means UEFA, FIFA, but also clubs, amateur clubs, and all the pyramid.
Excellent.
We are trying to say, dear parents, please deal with your children in this way to inspire them.
Right.
We don't want to teach them to say,
Sure.
you must do it.
Right.
Please inspire. We inspire them and try to do the best. In every dressing room in the 250,000 amateur clubs, we will show the tips for parents, coaches in the dressing room.
Excellent.
This will be in 12 months. We will launch the first module that will be physical activity on 12 of February, but every 2 months we will launch the other five toolkit, and in September we will launch also the toolkit that we are doing with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
And Human Change. Thanks for the support of Human Change. We once again feel our responsibility.
Well, you find yourself in a unique position with connections to all of those different audiences there. So thank you so much for embracing that in your leadership. That's just so important. Mitch, the final word before we turn to some questions as we invite those from our audience here. You, at a practical level, I mean, you have teens that come into the lab and you ask them about the number of times they pick up their phone. I'm sure you have parents who say, what do I do? What are some of the first things that you share with those parents?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think it's wonderful to see that schools and athletics are really getting behind this movement. You know, I'll just pick up on what Gaia was talking about with getting angry. You know, every time you respond to a notification, they're winning. Every time you get on your phone expecting to be on for 2 minutes and you end up being on your phone for 45 minutes, they're winning. So how do you take control back? Well, you can wait before your children get a phone. You can take those phones away at 9 o'clock at night and let them get their sleep. You can only use your phone in the privacy of a room or an area in the house where your kids don't see you. Don't bring it to the dinner table. Don't let them bring it to the dinner table. When you have a dinner party and everyone walks in the door, you show them where to put their coats and their purses and their phones. And we say, this is going to be a party without devices, and we're going to talk to each other. When your kids have a sleepover, you say, this is a no device sleepover. They can come over, but leave the device at home. If you need to reach your kid, call me, the parent. This is how we win. This is how we change the culture. And it's so hopeless seeming sometimes, because here there's an entire promenade about trying to get us to use technology more. But we can do this. Think about the pandemic. Think about when people talked about doom scrolling. And think about how we all started to talk with each other and say, uh-oh, I'm doing it, you're doing it, we should stop doing it. And we supported each other. And we talked about it. We gave it we gave language to it. We recognized when we were doing something unhealthy. There were even people that would put posts into the feed to say, are you doom scrolling right now? You should stop. Right. We created a norm as a culture to change our online behaviors. We can do that again. So we have this power. We just have to harness that anger and realize that we are ultimately the customers of all of these products, and our behavior has more power if we band together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yes. No, go ahead.
So
we'll take some questions. Yes, thank you. Go ahead and introduce yourself and then go ahead. Yeah.
My name is Manoj Gursahani. I'm actually an author on the subject called the Human Connect and a TED speaker. So fabulous session. I quickly want to add an acronym based on all that, which I built on the talk also. It's called BLINKS, body language, listening skills, I is taking interest, N is remembering names, Q is quality versus quantity, and S is staying in touch. If you put all that together, it helps humans being connected, whether it's students, elderly especially, and I can go on and on, but that's the subject of my interest, and thank you for articulating it so beautifully.
No, thank you. That's great. I love the acronym. Easy to remember. That's very good. Yes. We have a number around the room here. Go ahead. Hello.
Hi. My name's Claudia Mahler, and I work in New York and Zurich and Berlin. And 2.5 years ago, I started to bring something that I've done in New York for the past 8 years, my salons. which I hold for women to be together in an evening and discuss a topic for like 70 minutes without devices. And because the responses were so great, and I was told you make magic happen, which I really don't know, but it's probably right, the significance and the depth of the human connection. So I expanded to other cities, and then I've been thinking and have done research, and then the last Harvard Business Review brought it together in an amazing article connected with studies. The loneliness epidemic doesn't stop in the workplace, and just because you're part of a team doesn't mean automatically that you feel connection. So now I'm working with brands and companies to bring this simple form of sitting together without an agenda. There's no workshop and no coach that tells you how to do this better and that better. It's really just to be there, what you've mentioned earlier, this experience of exchanging time with a focus and no electronics. And it sounds maybe simple, and we all think, it's so easy, to have a conversation. No, it's not. And it's so easy to actually really listen. I mean, how many people are really listening to me right now? Yeah. So I think it is actually possible to do this, but I find it extremely hard with organizations and businesses. I'm, reaching out to HR people and DEI employees and leaders, that they really, understand that would actually be a pretty smart and very cost efficient way to invest into their employees, and to foster retention. Absolutely. And to support the also emotional connectivity to your workplace.
That's right. Invest in the people, and the people will stay.
Just on that, though, as much as you assume that that's what we believe, what I've heard in 2 or 3 closed meetings in the last couple of days is that we'll replace the HR with agentic AI. We'll make a more efficient system. You don't necessarily need all of this human complication. That's where we have to push back.
Right.
And I'll tell you, in the education system, when you talk about personalized learning, but there's no person, that's wrong, right?
Right. Yeah, the messaging is all wrong. That's right. Thank you so much. Jenna, yes. Hello.
Thank you. My name is Ivana Fruda. Thank you so much. It's amazing what you have talked about. You talk about loneliness pandemic. I feel like we should talk about epidemic. We should talk about loneliness pandemic. It actually treated as a pandemic. Look, it took us 2 days here in Switzerland to close the borders and say no entry for anyone, right? So it's about I feel like the social media virus that we suffer from. Everyone suffers from these days, actually. And the question is, how can we ensure that we treat this pandemic as a virus? As a COVID virus, and what can we do about this individually and collectively, also on the policy level?
How can we move that quickly, right? If we can close the borders in
Absolutely.
2 days, right? How can we move faster? Yeah. Wow, that's an issue worth solving. Any just quick thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, from a policy perspective, what we're seeing in some countries are ministers of loneliness. In the UK and in Japan, they are creating, they're working within communities to identify people who are lonely. And this is not just the elderly. It goes even to university students who are living in university. They're also lonely, working with all these communities. Another policy issue is some of the trends of loneliness are just emerging. Part of the problems we've talked about, like screens, we've been stuck there like frogs in the boiling water without noticing for years. But stuff that's changing right now, if you own a business and you have a choice, what model do you want to have? Do you want to have a model in which you have more self-service, fewer people employed, less interaction? You can make a choice, and governments can incentivize certain choices.
Say, there's so many people here that are doing so many amazing things on this issue. It would be exciting to think about something that everyone could do together to make a giant impact. I have sometimes wondered what an international log off day would look like if we all decided across the world to pick one day and
Right.
say, we're not going to use our social media or our devices for one day.
One day.
And the reason why I say this is because this is what we have done in our class at the University of North Carolina, where we have 200 undergraduates, and we tell them for one day your class assignment is to not use your device. And then they write to us and tell us about it. Some of these kids have never had a day like this in their lives.
Wow.
They have never not been on their device from the minute they got them, back when they were 12. And even before they were 12, they were using devices. And they tell us after just one day, they learned they could make eye contact, they could pay attention, they could exercise, they could sleep, they could read a book, they could have a social interaction, a conversation. They felt less lonely.
Amazing.
What if we had an international experiment
Right.
where all of our organizations, all of the wonderful work that you're all doing, unified on one goal? And we tried that.
And that hopeful possibility is real. We did it with 4 million people. We called it the Disconnection Challenge in Alberta. And then we had a reconnection challenge, so that it was like, know what happens if you because we knew they would reconnect.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's possible, and would it be amazing to have an international movement like that?
Excellent. I think we have our goal for the year. When we come back next year, we'll all celebrate the day that we experienced Dr. Mitch Prinstein's International Day of Logging
Yeah,
Off.
disconnection.
So yes, we have many others here. Why don't we go ahead? Yes. Hello.
Hello, thank you very much for that. I thought it was very, very inspiring. And I think it's interesting when you mention 60,000 years, and then only the last 20 years are the years that have become all very distorted. It's interesting to think that actually, maybe this movement is inevitable. Are we ready for the masses to actually adopt what we're talking about right here? Because it's probably most likely that they will. It can't be that 20-year blip is the future. That can't be possible. So when that happens, how do we make sure that it happens in the way that we want it to happen, so that it doesn't start another endemic? And I think improving the quality of discourse, to restore the quality of discourse, to reintroduce play, as you've mentioned, which I thought was brilliant. And I think this is the best event in Davos because everyone's listening.
So thank you. Yes. Okay. All right.
Fabulous panel and beautifully moderated. I think we should put a show of hands for the moderator. You were fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm from India and I'm an educationist. I work with families and children and help them develop their career goals. So this panel was especially relevant.
Absolutely.
I've attended actually sessions at AI House and here. So the conversations obviously have a very different audience and a very different tonality. The conversations there talk about all the efficiency in AI and how they're trying to bridge the AI readiness gap, right? So they're going to do a lot more of what we're talking about. They're talking about how we get more technology in, more devices, more tools, more applications, etc. And that is so if you walk through the promenade, that's a big voice around here.
It is, yes.
So it's very refreshing to see the other side because I see the downside of all that tech as well. How are you guys thinking about balancing efficiency with this loneliness gap? What they're saying there is some merit to technology, right? We've all seen the advantages of technology as well. How do you balance this as a parent, a teacher, as a counselor? How do you balance this? Because we're all using technology. I'm here because I booked something. I had to register for this event online.
That's
so
right.
Not to demerit technology entirely, but how do we sort of coexist pragmatically?
That's right. Yeah.
There's a concept called mindful technology use. It's when are we using technology as a tool that helps us versus when is technology using us to help it? And I think that's the difference. And I think most of us in our own lives can understand when we are using it because it's helping. We can quickly text somebody and say, I'm running late. That's a great use of technology when we might not have another way to communicate. But when is technology taking our time that we didn't want to spend? It's taking our attention. It's taking our social connections away. Mindful social media use or mindful technology use is very simply understanding when you pick up your device, what's my goal for using my device at this moment? It's to respond to a notification and tell them that I'm running late and I expect to be on for 60 seconds. When we do that, we are less likely to get sucked into using technology in ways we don't want. So I think that's the difference, is really recognizing within ourselves and our own habits and helping our kids do this for themselves. When are we using it as a tool, and when are we the tool that's being used?
And I think what you're pointing toward there, Mitch, which is so important, is making that decision ahead of time.
Right.
Because the tool will consume unless you decide ahead of time only to use it as a tool, right? So I think we need to, whatever context you might be in, education, right? Decide ahead of time, I'm only going to choose technologies that are transformative or supportive for my students, and classify uses of technology, ignoring those that are disruptive, ignoring those that aren't supporting learning outcomes, even if they're a part of the curriculum, but making that decision ahead of time. So,
and think about it as nutrition. Try and map this as action to something that you live every day.
Yeah.
If you were to drink soft drinks as your primary, substance, you would have lots of issues. If, however, every once in a while, and I love desserts, you have dessert. You have to find a balance like nutrition. The hard and fast screen time rules that were set of 2 hours a day, and they didn't work because it just wasn't a way that people could navigate it ongoing. So when you talk about something sustainable that's an approach, think of how technology is like nutrition.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to invite, we'll have the panelists here. First, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much for being with us here today. We're going to be heading off to the side there. Please stick around. In 15 minutes, we have the future of data. I want to leave you with this, because the excellent question in the back about what we can do now. I think we can do things now in the spaces we can control. Start at the micro. It doesn't have to be the big. I was reminded recently, there was a whole town in Texas that decided to take a phone-free break as a town, the community. They traded in their smartphones. There was an incentive to use a techless device, a dumb phone, for a whole fall. And they had fall festivals and community parties and all of these things. There was one quote from a teenager who was participating in this. And he said, "I saw the sunrise for the first time in 2 years." Right? A micro thing, but one teenager who saw the sunrise, who will remember that more than 2 years of interactions with his technology. Don't underestimate the power of a conversation with one young person to point them back toward the power of human connection instead of digital connection.